Noir City, the renowned film festival started by Eddie Muller in San Francisco, has become a nationwide celebration of classic film noir. The festival is headed to Philadelphia November 15th through the 17th at the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville. Noir City brings the shadowy world of crime, mystery, and intrigue back to the big screen, celebrating some of the genre's most iconic films. As the founder and president of the Film Noir Foundation and a TCM host, Muller has expanded the mission beyond just preserving films to reviving the authentic movie-going experience and cultivating a new generation of fans. Today, Eddie Muller, a writer and film historian, joins us to discuss the festival's impact and future. Hi, Eddie. Thanks so much for your time today.
Pleasure. Thank you, Veronica. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. That was very concise. And wow, I'm going to use this. So excuse me if your words become my new formal intro. That was great.
Great. Thanks so much. So first, let's start with what inspired you to expand Noir City from San Francisco to cities across the country, including Philadelphia.
Well, we surprised ourselves in San Francisco by how well attended the first couple of festivals were. And it was actually people who came from outside the area, New York specifically at that time. My friend Foster Hirsch, who's a colleague and is also on the board of the Film Noir Foundation, he said, you have to expand this into other cities. And we started thinking of compatible venues. So as you said in your introduction, that was so spot on. This began as a way of celebrating these films that I love. But then when I realized a lot of them were missing and needed to be preserved, that was the next part of the mission. But then when it was successful in San Francisco, we realized, there are other venues like the Castro Theater in San Francisco around the country who need something like this to kind of bring classic cinema back to a vintage movie palace sort of thing. And so the Colonial in Phoenixville obviously fits the bill perfectly because they're sort of on a restoration mission, just as I am with the movies, they are with the venue itself, because it has a storied history and it's a fantastic place to watch a movie. So we just did that in 8 different cities around the country. It was like each one, and we're very specific. We don't want to show in museums. We don't want to intellectualize this and make it seem like it's a learning experience about classic cinema. We want to try to recreate the feeling of going to the movies at the time these pictures were originally made. And so the venues are very important to us, that they have that feeling and that ambiance.
Absolutely. And watching it with a group of fellow fans is always a different experience. Can you tell us a little bit about the significance of film noir in American cinema history?
Well, to me, what makes it so fascinating and why I've got my Noir Alley show on TCM is really one of the few franchises, as they call it, where they kind of let me run wild and talk much more effusively about the subject, because it happened at a specific time in American history where there were so many interesting facets of the culture that were brought to bear on the creation of these movies. It was the post-war environment. It was it was the beginning of the witch hunt era and the anti-communist hysteria in the country that had a huge impact on the writers and directors making these movies. It was a time when Hollywood was growing up. And so the idea of you had to always have a happily ever after ending on a movie was kind of being dismissed by a lot of the artists. And finally, it was just fascinating to me because it was an artistic movement within Hollywood that was generated entirely by the artists themselves. The movies no film noir movie is like within the top 5 grossing films of its year. They just weren't blockbusters like that. They were small movies that just the public really gravitated toward, but and actors were able to do different things. Play the bad guy for a change. If you were a hero like Dick Powell and you wanted to roughen up your image, you could do that in these movies. And so it was just everything from the art to the commerce to the politics to the changing culture. It all had an effect. And so that's why I sort of teach film noir as an aspect of American history.
Now, what criteria do you use when selecting films for Noir City festivals?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, the Film Noir Foundation works to restore and preserve lost films. So obviously that's, we're always going to show those, because what's very fortunate about the work that I do is we don't just preserve films, we exhibit them. And we're one of the only operations doing this where it began with the exhibition part of it. We had the built-in audience to watch the films that we would save. That isn't always the case with archives and things who work so hard to restore movies and then have to search to find the audience for them. I mean, I get an audience built in, not only in my festivals, but on Turner Classic Movies. So that's great. But choosing the films is very interesting because you have to appeal to the hardcore fans who think they know everything and have seen everything. But you also can't lose sight of the younger generation who maybe have never even seen a black and white movie on a big movie screen before. And so you have to go back and show the classics, the established titles, along with the more obscure titles that I may be particularly fond of unearthing. So it's kind of an art balancing this stuff. And I think the program that we're doing this year in Phoenixville, I think that is very emblematic of the challenges and the excitement of programming a festival.
Now, what about the role that the Film Noir Foundation plays in preservation, as you talked about, and of course, restoration of some of these films, some of which you receive from around the world?
Well, there have been two things that have been very fascinating to me. Number one was that when I got into this, it was just like, let's find this film and show it. But then you learn that films can disappear for various reasons. The ownership changes, the materials actually get lost. So saving the films was a crucial thing. The other thing that really amazed me was traveling around to film archives around the world, searching for English language films. I came to the realization that film noir is not specifically an American phenomenon, because a lot of other countries were making their version of film noir at the same time. And so this is what the program this year that we're doing, called Darkness Has No Borders, this is what it highlights. I tried to pair an English language Hollywood film with a foreign film that is very, very similar to it. So if it's a prison movie, a Hollywood movie like Black Tuesday, I will show it with the French film La Trou, which means the hole, which is one of the great French films of all time about a prison break. So, and this way people can see how much wonderful cultural differences, but then how much similarity we all have, despite wherever we are in the world and what nationality we may be.
Now, your work certainly keeps you busy at your foundation, but you're also a Turner Classic Movies host. So, in addition to hosting your weekend segment, you also attend events for the network. So, what has some of that feedback been like when you talk to fans who attend these festivals and other events?
It's pretty amazing. Considering that I started as a writer, which is the most solitary, isolated experience you can have as a profession, to suddenly be hosting these things. My dad was a pretty good public speaker, so it wasn't a daunting thing when I got up to introduce movies the first time. But to think that it has come to this, and now the reaction that the fans have is absolutely extraordinary. I cannot tell you how many people have told me, either written to me or told me in person, how essential Turner Classic Movies was to getting them through COVID. I mean, they're big fans anyway, but when they were trapped in the house, it just kicked things up to a whole other level of I dare say, intimacy between the network and its fans, because it really does feel like a family, and as you know, that when the fans come to the film festivals or they go on the cruise and they interact with us, and it's not something you see from any other television network. People don't talk about their passionate loyalty to the, well, I'm not going to say it because somebody may be sponsoring your show. I don't know. But but you know what I'm saying, like a news network or a cooking network or something. They just don't have fans that are this passionate. TCM is in a class by itself.
It really is. When we look at the future, where do you see the Noir City Festival potentially going or growing, whether it's here in the US or internationally?
Well, not a week goes by that I don't field an invitation from some other venue that wants to add themselves to the network. Uh, I can only be stretched so thin. So I think what is happily transpiring is that, I'm in act 3 of my life now, Veronica, and I'm very happy the way all this has gone. But I think I need to start planning the succession plan. I need to start working out a succession plan. And that's why it's so important to do these festivals and to attract a younger generation of people who themselves will become so dedicated, dare I say, obsessed with old movies, and not just film noir, but just older movies in general, because that's the cultural dream that we told ourselves was what was contained in these movies, and you can really learn from that, both positive and negative stuff. And so it's vital to keep this going, and it's essential that young people become a part of that. And I want them to understand the value of going to a theater and seeing movies big with people of a like mind or not. That experience is so vital. It was essential to my development as a person. And I just don't think it's that we're looking at something on your phone on a little screen and then being distracted by everything. That is not the way to do movies. And so my hope is that we'll continue to expand internationally as well. I have invitations to do the festival in various cities around the world. But to me, it's bringing younger people into this and sharing that passion with them, and so that they can take the torch and run with it.
Absolutely. And when you watch classic films, it's really such a snapshot in time. Of course, albeit a little bit dramatized, but still, it gives you that taste and flavor of what things were like at that time. For people who are interested and they want to attend the Philadelphia Festival, how can they do so?
Well, if you go to noircity.com, that's really all you need to do. Through our portal, you'll learn about the festival, you'll learn about the Film Noir Foundation, and there will, of course, be links where you can go directly to the Colonial's website to order tickets or passes. It's great fun. And if you haven't been to Phoenixville, to the Colonial Theater, it itself is a treat just to go and do that. I remember last year was our first year there, and I started doing the Noir City Festival on Barbenheimer Friday. And they were showing both Barbie and Oppenheimer, and they earned my eternal gratitude because they put my festival in the big theater.
That's fantastic. Well, Eddie Muller, it has been such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely my pleasure, Veronica. Thank you for having me.